Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. There are many questions that follow enactment of a bill, including what does this mean and how will this get implemented? We're going to be asking those and other questions a lot in the coming weeks as we examine the recently enacted One Big Beautiful Bill. For this episode, we're focused on the new law's impact in the financial services space. Joining me to get into the details of this is Brian Rebhun, PwC's Financial Services Tax Leader. Brian, welcome. It's great to see you.
It's great to be back talking about the OBBB.
Yes. So before we get into details about what's happened that affects the financial services space, I want to get an overall impression of what you've been hearing from people who are in that space and what the first impression has been of the new law.
So I would say from where we started a few weeks ago to where we are today, the two words I would say are surprised and happy. What we will talk about in a little bit will show that the financial services sector actually came out surprisingly well from the One Big Beautiful Bill.
All right, so let's get right into it. What were the biggest items not included in the final bill that originally were contemplated in the original House and Senate bills?
So I would say the biggest thing that we saw was the pass-through entity tax, certainly starting number one. From the House bill, it was going to be completely eliminated for most financial services companies because it was going to be tied to the specified services trade or business language in 199A. Under the past law, pass-through entity tax is going to be fully deductible, similar to what it is under current law. Other things that we had thought about were things like the New York City UBT and other state and local income taxes were no longer going to be deductible, and those actually survived as well. So that was probably the biggest thing we saw when we thought of what was not included in the final version, was that pass-through entity taxes are here to stay and they will be continue to be deductible. The second, which really impacted the financial services industry, was Section 899, the retaliatory tax. As many saw, Secretary Bessent came out and said that the 899 would no longer be as part of the bill, and it wasn't in the final bill, and in exchange for relief on the Pillar 2 language. That was a major concern for a lot of our financial services clients, especially in the asset and wealth management sector, specifically in private credit and direct lending. The third, and I had to learn what the Byrd rule was, is the litigation financing amendments that were in there that Senator Tillis had put in there and that Senator Thune had taken out. This was specifically targeted to fund managers that were financing litigation reform, and basically would have included an excise tax of upwards of 40.8% on that, plus a withholding requirement in addition to the excise tax. So under the Byrd rule, it was removed, which was welcome news to a lot of fund managers. The last two were carried interest, right? Carried interest was not part of the House bill or the Senate bill, but it was something that President Trump had talked about early on. So fund managers, again, very, very happy that carried interest was not impacted. And the last was in the House bill, BDCs or business development companies, which are used for direct lending, were going to be included in the 199A language, similar to REITs. And that was not included in the Senate bill and ultimately in the final bill. So REITs now and business development companies are going to have different treatment of their dividends that are coming out from them, even though they're ordinary in nature.
So, Brian, what are the biggest items that did get included?
Well, it was certainly the permanency of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, specifically around the highest effective rate, things like the estate tax exemption, and including 461L, which is the excess business loss limitation. In the original HR 1 from the House, there was going to be a potential change to 461L, which would not include it to be a net operating loss after the first year. So basically the current law, which is that after year one, where you only have up to a $500,000 deduction against passive income, it becomes an NOL. That's now going to be current law. But I would say the things that were included, things like 174 expensing, full expensing overall, bonus depreciation, Section 199A becoming permanent, The QSBS rules, the qualified small business stock rules, being expanded to include different hold periods and also a different requirement for the asset test going to 50 to 75 million was extremely important. And then also the finalization of the opportunity zones, something that was really important during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and what we saw in the real estate sector, where there was a lot of investment into these opportunity zones, which were supposed to be rural or urban areas that needed redevelopment, have now been extended as well. So those big factors, as well as some international provisions, including BEAT and GILTI, I think were the biggest considerations that financial services companies are going to have to deal with for implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill.
All right. So what is next? What are the next steps for companies? And when answering this question, I would love to get some insight from you about the kind of lift with respect to any changes that it means for companies and what they're going to do.
Well, first, we have now certainty, right? We've been talking about for months the uncertainty, which included both the tax legislation and tariffs, which still has some uncertainty. But we have now certainty of what the law is going to be, right? So I think now is time for implementation from a federal income tax perspective of a lot of the things we just talked about. So the second part is we're going to have to see how the states conform to this or decouple from this. During 2017, a lot of states decoupled from some of the provisions like bonus depreciation, the EBITDA limitations of 163J. So those are things that I think we'll have to see how the states that are now going through their budgetary considerations are going to come out. And the third thing I would say is the Section 899 really caused a lot of uncertainty around foreign investment into the U.S. So what we're hearing now is now that has been lifted, foreign investment may be pushed back. There was some pause on that with the determination of whether this would be implemented or not. So we're hoping that will be the case, that there'll be more foreign investment coming into the U.S., specifically in private credit, infrastructure, private equity. In terms of implementation, I think what we talked about, the first thing, the pass-through entity tax is probably going to be the biggest thing that now people focus on, right? Of how do we implement this now that we know that there's some permanency to it? And there's just a lot of operational issues, cash flow management, treasury functions. How do you deal with the, ultimate cash flow that goes out of the organizations for purposes of pass-through entity tax? Structuring will come into play of, do we want more partnerships and as well versus corporations or S corporations? So I think internal organizations, tax departments are going to have to think through that, right? And understand that with pass-through entity tax in particular, as a recovering state and local tax guy, I would say the ultimate implementation and operational parts of that is very challenging for most organizations and is really going to need to be addressed, knowing now that we have permanency.
Thanks for that detail, Brian. I really appreciate that and would love to, at some point, get into a lot more detail, get some granular information about implementation as this goes along. But thank you so much for all of this.
Thank you, Sindhu. It's been a pleasure as always.
As I mentioned earlier, we are going to dig into various aspects of this new law and what it means for you. Stay with Policy on Demand for that and much more from Washington. Take care.